A 29-year-old Uzbek native is being held without bail after investigators say he admitted to driving a rented truck down a crowded bike path in Manhattan Tuesday, killing 8 people. He said he was inspired by ISIS. He was arraigned yesterday in federal civilian court on charges that including providing material support to ISIS. Shortly after, Donald Trump tweeted out that he, quote, should get the death penalty for the crime. Call that raised the red flag among some court watchers. Joining me now are 2 former U.S. attorneys from this region. Carmen Ortiz, who served under Barack Obama. She's now with Anderson and Krieger, LLP. Good to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Nice to meet you.
We're also joined by our immediate predecessor, Michael Sullivan, who was appointed by George W. Bush. He's now a partner at Ashcroft Law. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay, let's go back to those days of yesteryear. You're prosecuting an alleged terrorist, as both of you have. You wake up in the morning and see the President of the United States has not once but twice publicly called for the death penalty for that person you're prosecuting. What's your reaction, Carmen?
Under these times, I'm not surprised, but it's unfortunate.
Do you worry about your prosecution?
I would, and I just slightly, but knowing what the jury selection process is in a terrorist case and potentially a death penalty case, I'm not too worried.
Would you be?
No, I wouldn't be. And I guess my reaction would be we're probably like-minded on the issue, considering, the horrific, crime that he's been alleged to have committed.
The judge in the Bo Bergdahl case the other day said that he would consider a lighter sentence because the president said the same thing there. I mean, that's not a dissimilar situation, is it?
Well, I mean, that's a judge making a comment, and judges can make comments that might be politically motivated, too.
Well, let's stay on this. Obviously what underlies my question is, can he get a fair trial? And in addition to the death penalty thing, Michael, let me stay with you. New York City terrorist was happy as he asked, this is another tweet, to hang ISIS flag in his hospital room. He killed 8 people, badly injured 12. How does he get a fair trial when there are, what does he have, 40 million followers on Twitter? Every newscast is repeating what the president said. How does this guy get a fair trial?
Well, he will, because he's required to get a fair trial, and a federal district court judge will make sure he gets a fair trial, and that's making sure that jurors have not made up their mind concerning the guilt or innocence or the imposition of sentence if, in fact, he's found guilty.
Wouldn't you worry that a juror's mind, even if they, in good conscience, raised their hand and said, I will not consider anything other than that which I hear in the courtroom, wouldn't you worry that something like this from the President of the United States relentlessly would compromise their ability to do this?
Not particularly so, and I say that because there was so much attention, media attention, remarks, perhaps not by a president, obviously not by a president, in the Boston Marathon case.
Obviously
and that was an issue. But I saw the process that is entailed in that kind of a case, and I think that a judge going through this very thorough and probing process with both defense and prosecutors at the table. It's a lengthy process, but for a good reason. And when you
you've never, Carmen, if I may, but neither of you ever lived through this kind of publicity from a leading elected official. Maybe they made an off-hand remark. By the way, someone in the Obama administration did in another terrorist prosecution, but never relentlessly like this, center stage in every newscast. That still doesn't worry you.
Oh, it worries me and it concerns me, and quite frankly, I would try to get a message through White House counsel that these kind of remarks are, have the potential to seriously impair the prosecution in this case. But at the end of the day, the trial is probably a couple of years away. In this kind of a case, and hopefully these kind of comments will stop.
One last thing about what Donald Trump has said. He originally said Guantanamo would be a better place, and then he obviously was spoken to by somebody, or as the New York Times said, or he watched someone on television, and changed to say, no, the civil system will be faster. All the objective evidence suggests, and you both know it on the terms of the prosecutions I mentioned of terrorists, the civil judicial system is totally well prepared, in many ways far better prepared than military tribunals created after 9/11 to try these very kind of people. Is it not, Michael?
Well, I'd say in most instances, yes, if there's a criminal component.
Not?
Well, in certain circumstances in which you're taking people off the battlefield, when the military tribunals works much better, or holding people, detaining people for other purposes makes much more sense than a civilian court.
But so far, civilian courts have not failed prosecutions, have they, in these kind of cases?
Absolutely not. And this case is perfectly primed for being tried in the Southern District of New York. The crime occurred there. The victims, were from out of town, but the suffering and the impact. You need the transparency and the locality of a federal trial in that particular community so that people can see justice actually being served.
This guy was on the radar of some investigators. You both know this. Supposedly he had downloaded 90 propaganda videos into his phone. How much latitude do people like you have in your former lives to surveil download histories? I mean, is that doable or is it not doable?
I'd say it depends. Like most instances, it really depends in terms of how much latitude you have. There are circumstances in which you'd have great latitude with regards to doing some type of surveillance, both in terms of what they're getting, electronically versus also what they're doing physically.
You obviously prosecuted Tariq Mahana, and in great part on internet stuff. He didn't commit an act of terror. If you were able to do this kind of surveillance on this guy here, would you have enough to prosecute him if all you had was the downloading of this material that he had done? No.
Watching the type of propaganda and recruitment videos and photos that ISIL or Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or any other...
Constitutionally protected?
It's constitutionally protected. Radicalization, having thoughts and believing that American foreign policy is terrible and that, down with America, that's protected. It's when you mobilize. When you take those thoughts and you move to violence, that is not protected. And it depends how much of an act you actually commit.
One last question before you go. Here's the president yesterday talking about how the justice system has failed. Here's President Trump.
We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. What we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughing stock.
This is not a legal question. You both ran offices with a lot of dedicated people. When the leader of this country makes a comment like that, what does it do to the prosecutors who work for you and all the other people who work to the bone night and day to serve their country? What is that?
Well, I think what he's expressing is frustration with regards to the long time between the time when an event is committed to the time when punishment is served. And a great example is Gary Lee Sampson, who essentially killed 3 people in the summer of 2001. That's 16 years later, and the sentence has not been imposed yet.
You think he even knows who Gary Lee Sampson is?
He probably doesn't, but I'm sure he's felt the frustration of the length of time from the time that somebody has committed a horrific act, and that's what he's
Quickly, do you worry about things like that?
That's the exception. No, I just think it's demoralizing and terrible, and not really a sign of true leadership in this arena.
Carmen, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. I hope to see you again. Michael, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.